I'm Dean Armstrong QC. I am joint head of chambers at the 36 Group. That's a set of barristers' chambers, which is based in London, but we have offices in Singapore and in Cyprus. I'm also head of one of the specialists teams within one of the groups in chambers. 36 Commercial is one of the groups, and I'm head of the specialist cyber law group. I'm a published author on, amongst other things, cybersecurity and cyber litigation, but probably most pertinent for today's discussion, I'm a published author on the international and regulatory aspects of blockchain and cryptocurrency. I am delighted to be joined by Racheal Muldoon. She is also a barrister at 36 Commercial. She has a broad practice across cyber, art, contract and tax law. In the past years, she has developed a specialism in assisting with the recovery of stolen cryptocurrency. She's for a long period advised those in the art and cultural heritage sectors. She's worked at the British Museum, her in-house role as senior legal counsel there, and she's also advised private dealers of ivory and other regulated artifacts. I'm delighted to say that Racheal and I frequently work together, and we work on contentious and non-contentious matters with a particular cyber law thread. In fact, of today's relevance to today's discussions, we are currently, and we've recently advised on an international auction house on its very first sale of an NFT, of a digital artwork which actually sold for several £million. So we are pleased to be able to say that we've actually been there at the sharp end and done this. And that is a pleasure for us both. Much more of a pleasure for today's purposes is also the fact that we are delighted to be joined by two esteemed colleagues of ours who, mercifully for I'm sure the audience, are not lawyers. We are joined first of all by Professor Lisa Short. Lisa is the founder of P&L Digital Edge and the newly appointed Chief Research Officer at the Global Foundation for Cyber Studies and Research. Lisa is an internationally recognized leader in the blockchain space. She has long advised international governments and industry on digital technology, providing truly innovative strategic solutions. And she has very kindly agreed to join us from Australia, which is where she is at the moment. I can't begin to think what time it might be over there, Lisa, but we appreciate the fact of you joining us. We equally appreciate the fact of Nonna Decking, who is the CEO of Artery, a blockchain-powered database that tracks the provenance of artwork using records from museums, auction houses, and galleries and art fairs. Nonna founded Artery in 2016 after serving as Sotheby's vice chairman and worldwide head of private sales. In addition to this, Nonna was until last year the chairman of the board of the TEFAF. So we are absolutely delighted to welcome you this afternoon to, or wherever your time scale is, because it might be different times for different people, obviously. But what is unique about this webinar, and others of you may have been and attended some of the other cyber webinars, well, this 36 Commercial webinar is where we are delighted to have, as I say, our colleagues Lisa and Nonna with us. Lisa bringing her practical technical know-how, Nonna his art industry experience. And it's very much a belief and a view of us at 36 Commercial that when it comes to this new technology, it is vital that those of us from different disciplines come together to provide what we believe and should be and can be a one-stop shop for clients. We are able to call upon the expertise and experience of people like Lisa and Nonna to assist in giving clients and potential clients the whole 9 yards, the whole package. And it's vital as we look in this new technology and how it applies to ancient industries, as we will be talking about those matters today, that we get that context. Just a little signpost of where we're going to be framing this discussion. There's going to be several headings we're going to be dealing with. It's going to be looking across particularly art, but also luxury asset sectors. We're going to be talking about what is an NFT. Is there a demand for NFTs? And will it continue after what we are terming or have been termed the NFT boom? What are the value propositions of the NFTs? Who is the target audience? What is the investment required to trade NFTs at scale? What are the key resources and key partners needed to create NFTs? And then a final word from me before we're open to questions on the competition and NFT potential growth areas. So with that introduction, and as I say, our special warm welcome to our guests, can I ask you, Lisa, please, to kick us off with an overview, really, of what is an NFT? Is it worthless, or is it what is being bought? Please give us an overview from your technical and experience point of view.
Yeah, I think I'm going to I think that Racheal will do the some of the technical stuff, but the answer is no, it's actually not nothing. What an NFT is a representation of uniqueness and singularity. So an NFT is quite a unique thing in the sense that it is a crypto asset. It is not a cryptocurrency. An NFT can in itself, which is a piece of code that represents or points to an asset, whether it's physical or virtual. But what's quite interesting is the fact that the NFT itself can be an asset. It can point to a digital asset. It can point to a physical asset. And in fact, ownership and so forth can be represented by all of those connected, together. But in terms of the code, it is in essence a smart contract, and it sits on a blockchain, and there are various types of blockchain, public blockchains and permissioned blockchains. But I think one of the key features of an NFT is the fact that it isn't actually the virtual asset or the physical asset, it's a representation of that. But because of the value that it serves, it becomes an asset, which we call a crypto asset in its own regard. In that, I might flow to Racheal to talk more on the actual legal side of the NFT. But just one point that is important is that there are some elements about an NFT that make it quite unique. It is unique, so it cannot be replicated. It cannot be fractionalized. That will tell you straight away that if anybody tells you that they can be replicated, they don't understand what an NFT is. It is a singular, unique piece of code that represents an asset. But also there are elements about it such as persistence and provenance and scarcity that are all elements of an NFT that are unique to this asset class, if you like.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So, Racheal, yeah, I think you've had some obviously practical experience with your long involved history. There's a good example I think you're going to give us of this in action, aren't you?
Yes. So I think Lisa mentioned their perishability. So in the sense that a physical asset can cease to exist when it is connected to an NFT, but the NFT is immutable, it sustains. So on this point, those listening may be aware of the recently withdrawn sale of the NFT of Jean-Michel Basquiat's 1986 mixed media work titled Free Comb with Pagoda. Now, the press release for the sale on OpenSea stated as follows, that at the winner's discretion, the original artwork will be deconstructed, leaving the NFT as the only remaining form of Basquiat's work to exist. So make no mistake that by deconstructed, the seller meant that the work could be destroyed, leaving only the NFT as a representation of the work itself, the physical drawing itself. So the sale was widely publicized as a transaction that would memorialize ownership, and that reproduction and associated IP rights would attach to the NFT in perpetuity. This was accompanied by a somewhat questionable statement that a certificate of copyright would make its way to the winning bidder. Not unsurprisingly, this was met with complete outrage and considerable criticism, and particularly given the lack of consideration of the late artist's moral rights. So in the eyes of the art world, they all turned to Basquiat's estate, who confirmed that they retained the copyright in the artwork itself, with no license or moral or other rights having been conveyed to the private seller, and subsequently the sale was withdrawn. So would you agree, Nonna, that this example shows real confusion about what NFTs are and how rights are transferred through the sale of an NFT?
Well, there are many levels. What's happening here, right? First of all, the level of concern I don't necessarily believe is bad. If there's anything that I really like about what's happening with the creation of NFTs, where the actual NFT is seen as an artwork because of the digital image that's attached to it, many people, let's face it, we have a very sophisticated audience today, I'm sure, but many people refer to an NFT or think about an NFT as just a digital image that they have seen reproduced. We know it goes much deeper, of course. And in a way, what's happening to this Basquiat is it creates a whole conversation where people start to understand what is actually the meaning of an NFT. So I'm always against destroying artworks. I think it's a ludicrous idea, but I do like the conversation. I like the fact that people start to realize an NFT, of course, is an artwork as such, the way that Sotheby's, Christie's, and Phillips have presented these NFTs to new audiences. But there's so much more to an NFT, and I'm sure we're going to discuss so many details of it, that I actually really like. And the Basquiat statement was a confirmation of that. Don't forget, there is an NFT, and all the information captured in the NFT is so incredibly important because it contains all the key attributes that always have created value to an artwork that you can almost, and I would say almost, destroy the artwork. But again, I'm against destroying the artwork, but I really, in a way, in an almost cynical way, enjoyed the whole uproar and the conversation about it. Yeah.
Perhaps, Racheal, in that regard, talking about what the NFT is, that even though it is controversial, it demonstrates the fact that an NFT is a representation of a physical contract. And so the buyer, the seller, is the person who determines what those attributes are, regardless of how controversial that they are and what actually goes into it. So that's a really critical thing to know about an NFT, is the fact that there is still a physical contract that exists with an NFT, and there are classes of NFTs. So, there may well be, a marketplace for low-level, multiple things like, football cards and sports cards. But if you were going to put, the Mona Lisa and convert the ownership of that to, or the asset to an NFT, then there's a considerable amount of legal work that goes into that. So there's a contract that goes with it, but most importantly, they are determined terms of conditions that go with it. So I think even though it's controversial, it actually identifies exactly what is so special about an NFT.
It does, Lisa.
So Racheal, can you just talk us through really some legal facets of NFTs? Tell us what they are.
Absolutely. So I'm mindful that many of those joining us today, you would have perhaps tuned into various other NFT webinars, read various articles, and to be honest, a great deal of them simply get it wrong. And so what I will endeavour to do now is really distill what we've said so far and get to the crux of the legal issues here. So first principles, an NFT, as Lisa said, is a unique class of crypto asset. And that is a set of digital code that represents two things, uniqueness and singularity. So each NFT, the way we need to think about it is each of them being an asset. It's an asset in its own right and is a record, much like a certificate or receipt that is created and stored on an unchangeable digital ledger called the blockchain. So think of it as an asset, a record itself. Now, this online ledger, the blockchain, is decentralized. What are the benefits of that? Well, it's not controlled by any one person or any one entity, but by several thousand or more nodes that seek consensus between each other, verifying that that entry and its place, the NFT on the blockchain, is correct. An NFT is also unique in that, although it is a crypto asset in its own right, it manifestly and primarily represents and points to another, either digital or physical asset, or in some cases both, as Lisa said. So as with any asset, in the case of NFTs, it is fundamental that one can understand the rights and liabilities attached to these assets. So for instance, you need to know whether once you have acquired the NFT, whether you have the right to sell it or to use it as loan collateral, for instance. These rights and obligations are not, as Lisa said, contained only in a contract of sale in the conventional sense, but also in a digital smart contract. These terms of service are critical in law as a binding contract and represent the asset. So it is highly fortuitous, particularly in the UK jurisdiction, that crypto assets are recognised as property and they can be the subject to proprietary injunctions, with the leading authority being the High Court case in 2019 of AA and others. And so, of course, whether an NFT is considered property elsewhere in the world will be determined by the law governing that jurisdiction. As Dean will come to explore in more detail later on, smart contracts very simply consist of computer code. They self-execute, which means that there is a domino effect with one step leading to another upon an agreed event, such as the payment of cryptocurrency into a wallet. The parties must, as a first step, know what it is they are selling and buying, whether that is an NFT of a purely digital artwork or an NFT as a representative token or proxy of a real life physical asset or otherwise. So really our roles as lawyers is to make sure that at the first step, we know that the token has attached correctly to the asset. We must do this before moving on and satisfying ourselves that the terms agreed between the parties are accurately represented by the computer code in the smart contract. And it's this interplay between the asset and attaching it to the NFT that's fundamental when it comes to contractual certainty. So that's the overview. If we now then turn to the value propositions of NFTs, I'll shortly be turning to Dean, but before I do, it's the greatest criticism at the moment leveled against NFTs that they are valueless, that given that they are a version of a purely digital artwork such as Beeple's can be downloaded by anyone in the world, despite $69 million having been paid for it. This has led to a great deal of confusion and caution when it comes to NFTs. So Dean, is it the case that when it comes to NFTs, a fool and his money are easily parted with?
Happily not, as far as I am concerned. Interestingly and significantly for me, and those who know me or have read my work are aware that I'm a huge proponent of the blockchain. Immutability of title is for me absolutely crucial to the question of NFTs. Those of you with experience in the art world will know that ownership is one of the hot potatoes and has been for centuries, long before NFTs were certainly thought of. And so the value of an NFT rests in how each is unique and unequivocally confirms rights of ownership. And that's the confirmation of the right of ownership over the original version of the work is for me a significant feature of value. Putting it in technological terms, what's happening is it's an association of a blockchain address with a token identification. And by those means, you establish the proof of ownership. And this is really important on so many levels, because we'll look later on about smart contracts and how they bring those together. We look at asset finance in the sense of insurance of these assets. So the key centerpiece of all this is going to be the fact of proof of ownership, and in this particular situation, evidential audit trails to prove ownership. So NFTs have that huge and unique, I would suggest, advantage over other forms here. Furthermore, there are all the advantages of the blockchain, and Lisa and I often have discussions about whether people really know very much, and certainly whether they know enough about the blockchain. The blockchain tends to be overlooked as something which can change the world in terms of an ability to create proper audit trails of evidential matters and features. And the blockchain here is hugely significant because NFTs use a decentralized structure effectively, so that the ownership can be recorded upon the decentralized structure of the blockchain. It creates only entries. Blocked nodes are only added if there is a consensus. And at the moment, and I say at the moment, but at the moment there is not the computer power to hack the blockchain. So they are currently, and I mean currently for the next several, if not many years, unhackable. There's not the computer power in the world to do that. So that tokenization of the association of the blockchain address with the ID based upon an immutable line on the blockchain is what gives the NFTs unique value. It solves a problem which I'm sure Nona and his colleagues would have come across on so many occasions, as to, can we genuinely prove ownership? It would be very interesting, wouldn't it, to speculate and postulate. So much artwork has moved during the course of the different regimes, some of them autocratic in nature. It would be interesting had we had NFTs to represent those assets and visualize those assets with its own immutable line of evidential quality. How significant and how many more answers we might have had in respect of those. So what happens is, when you pay for an NFT, what you get is the right to transfer the token to your digital wallet. And that's really important. The token proves that your copy of a digital file is the original. So it's like owning an original painting. And this is really key. I'll just say it again because it is really vital. So when you pay for an NFT, what you get is the right to transfer the token to your digital wallet, and it's your ID wallet. And you then have ownership. And that doesn't devalue, as far as we are concerned. It doesn't devalue the artwork. In fact, far from it, we would suggest that it's a significant bonus. As Mike Winkelmann said, if you took a picture of the Mona Lisa in the Louvre and shared it online, do you devalue the Mona Lisa? Of course you don't. What might increase the value of the Mona Lisa, should that be possible, is proving ownership. And that's where we say the NFT market is so ripe for expansion, bearing in mind bringing all its gifts, and including the gifts of the blockchain, into play. So authenticity and provenance are really the key, and it allows an NFT allows an artist to create an official registry for the first version of any work they released. Now, again, what a huge benefit it is for the artist, what a huge benefit it is for the collector, to actually be able to say, here is the artist confirming this is the first version of the work, and having an evidential audit trail to assist it. It's also assisted, as Racheal has mentioned, because the way that the blockchain powers these arrangements is through smart contracts. As we've said and has been said, smart contracts in and of themselves, pieces of self-executing computer code based upon the blockchain. But how significant is that? It's hugely significant because it allows an automated process, and that takes away a huge amount of red tape, candidly, and particularly it takes away a huge amount of attendant costs. Now, it's vital, as we've said before, and we'll say again, that there is that combination of factors which allow that authenticity and those smart contracts to execute properly. But here we have almost like a menu, like a super ingredients level to bring what we want to bring, which is proper ownership, which is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to question and to deny. And that increases, as far as we are concerned, increases its ability to have proper and real value. Now, as a simple lawyer, if I can make that expression, I come at this from obviously principally from a legal point of view, but Nona, what do you feel about NFTs?
Well, Dean, I can't tell you how happy I am after 4 years ago that I founded Artread, where we were actually the first in the art market to use blockchain technology, not as market players, but by giving confidence to people buying and selling art. People always forget that in a way for the seller, there's also the reassurance of this kind of technology. Because I always said I had the easiest job in the world. If you stay away from any red flags being not being sure that someone owns title, red flags, everything you just said, Dean, is the artwork authentic, or are there at least the right scholars involved to prove authenticity, or is the artist still alive? All these elements make my life as a dealer quite easy to stay away from any red flags. And I gave up a job in the art market because I had learned so well after so many years what were these key attributes that create value for an artwork. And when I heard about blockchain technology through one of my biggest clients at the time, who was a very big name in the technology world, I realized this is something that will help the art market. It will help the art market because you can create a record of an artwork where all the due diligence that has been done can be recorded, and you make that record immutable and you give it a timestamp. These timestamps are also very important. You know, at this moment of time, this was everything that was known about the artwork. So it is actually a technological way to store all the evidence of risk mitigation that have been done. So with Artry, the company that I founded 4 years ago, we created a repository of credible artworks. Some people said Artry can only be a success if the entire marketplace believes in this. I'm not that naive. That I never expected the entire marketplace to believe in it. But if I can tell you that there's already 1 billion of art registered, where all the due diligence processes were actually captured and stored in blockchain, I think that's already a huge win, because that's a credible repository of artworks. For me, the next step with the NFTs is, of course, heaven, because an NFT as such has all that information encapsulated in the NFT of title, authenticity, etc. And I think the next step forwards is, Lisa was already mentioning it, is you can indeed attach a unique physical object to the NFTs and make sure that everything that needs to be known about that physical object to make it a credible physical object, whether it's a handbag from Louis Vuitton or a painting by Claude Monet or a painting from a young contemporary artist who doesn't want in the future that all kind of scholarly people will decide whether the artwork was made by him or her. No, this is the moment to actually put your whole oeuvre online and make sure that all that information is decided by you and that you can give the world all the information about the artworks that you've just created. So the NFTs as such, I think, are important for the art market. I was very much surprised to see 3 years ago, for example, with Artry, to see Christie's jump on us in a very, very sophisticated way by being the first big market player that registered an entire sale, then the Epsworth collection of American art, in blockchain. Very innovative, very, very adventurous that they did that. And I can't be grateful enough for them to having the confidence in the technology. Again, they were the first with Beeple to sell an NFT like that. It was a huge success financially. It was reputationally a huge risk for them. So I can only say it's very courageous. But what will happen is, what we see is new people will actually enter the art market. Not only new buyers, but also new artists. There's nothing new. Don't forget Andy Warhol with his Polaroid photographs. In those days, people thought that's absolutely crazy, and people got angry. When people get angry, there's something good happening, especially in the art market. So you will have new kind of people entering the art space, new artists using technology rather than artistic skills. And you get new buyers who are much more tech savvy than most of the art collectors right now, who don't necessarily like the art market because it's very exclusive. And with exclusive, I mean, it basically pushes you out if you're not an insider. So you have to start trusting people. And I always say, you only have to trust people when the facts are not there. The facts are there. Usually with an art transaction, the facts are there. And I like that about the NFTs. All the facts are there. It will attract new people to become artists. It will create a new audience, a tech-savvy audience, who will actually start to ask new questions to the art market as well, because people will buy another artwork, which is a physical artwork. And then they will say, hey, with my NFT, everything is there. There's a contractual agreement underneath. Everything is explained. There's an audit trail, who said what at what moment in time about this artwork. I own clear title. Everybody will see that. Okay, I will buy this Basquiat from you, but I want to have exactly the same kind of security from you that I had when I bought my NFT. So I think we're in for a very, very interesting ride. And I can't emphasize enough how important the underlying legal contracts are. I see too many people being engaged in the whole NFT market who don't understand that there should be a legal contract. You know, if there's a smart contract, which I think Lisa's explained it so well, a smart contract is just a technical kind of solution which triggers all those moments that are already defined in the NFT moving forward. But there should be an actual lawyer who creates the contractual agreement and a contractual reassurance of everything that is captured in that NFT to move forward. You know, otherwise you create a new kind of opaqueness where it's absolutely not necessary anymore. So,
all right, I think we're all going to agree with you, particularly on this side of the fence, that lawyers are vital to this process. So we're definitely going to be saying right about that. But Lisa, can I bring you in, if I may? And we've talked all about art per se, but can we then perhaps move to the connection between the physical and the virtual worlds, and potentially luxury assets generally? Can I bring you in on that?
Yeah, it's one of the most profound sides, I think, of an NFT is, maybe again, if we include like luxury goods, but it could also be a block of land. It can also be a reputation, a person's career. It can be anything that is unique that we are translating and representing in a non-fungible token, which means that it is unique. So one of the amazing things is being able to connect physical artworks and luxury good items, and you know, it could be a yacht even, for example, and the way that the technology frameworks are now adding, for example, you know, crypto seals to the physical item. So there's a contractual obligation that belongs to the physical item that has metadata that's attached to the non-fungible token code, and then which creates and then points back to the asset. There may even be a digital representation of the physical asset, might be plans, or it could be, you know, something, an architecture drawing, anything that may be associated to that. What's interesting though is that ownership may well be dependent on having the physical asset, the non-fungible token, and potentially even the insurance paperwork and other paperwork and contractual obligations that go with it. So, and I think that's really key to this connection from the physical world to the digital world that we're talking about. And it can be, and this is where the value of a non-fungible token exists, is that it is not just about luxury goods. Yes, it could be a Louis Vuitton. How do you prove that Louis Vuitton is an original item, particularly when, you know, copies and replicas can be made so easily and freely? Then there's going to be crypto films and ways of actually being physically attached to that physical item that will have metadata that attaches to the actual code. So, you know, I did just see in one of the questions that came up in the chat, you know, when you purchase a non-fungible token, are you getting the physical asset and the digital asset? I'm going to say maybe. That depends on the contractual obligations that have been predetermined by the seller. So, and that comes down to intellectual property rights and what you are actually selling when you sell a non-fungible token. So I think it's absolutely key. I think what is key also in terms of connecting the physical world to the virtual world is the concepts of persistence and pervasiveness and exclusivity and collectability. So a physical asset, for example, may have a lifespan. What do you do with a non-fungible token when the physical asset does no longer exist? This brings in interesting conversations in terms of insurance. So, you know, it may well be that moving forward, artworks and luxury good items will require a non-fungible token to be able to be insured, and that the NFT will become a representation of what you've actually insured as well. So it's a fascinating space, and this is the ultimate value. That's why, in fact, when it comes to a non-fungible token, you can actually have a non-fungible token in a cold wallet, which is literally like a physical wallet that is off-chain, and they're actually turning those into art pieces now as well. So you could actually physically hand around a non-fungible token on a wallet, and that's a physical asset as well. So there is no bounds to the value of what a non-fungible token can produce. And again, I think in some ways, as Nonna said, if people are getting angry about art, that's fantastic, because art is about culture. One thing that the pandemic has recognized in all of us is that art and culture are the things that make us human. And if we're talking about it, then that's a great thing. But I think the conversation that, because people are prepared to pay $69 million for people, or $2 or $3 million for a painting that no one else sees value in, is actually a moot point. Because art is art. What we pay for music, what we pay for art, what we pay for culture, what we pay for a car, what we pay for a house, it is an agreement between the buyer and the seller. It doesn't mean that the non-fungible token doesn't have a value and doesn't have technical capacity. The best example I can give of this is that a non-fungible token can be a person, a business, a reputation, a career. There is nothing more innately unique than every individual. So imagine turning your career, your CV, your capabilities as an individual into a non-fungible token that can be used as an asset to be, for example, to create possibilities for loans and credit and a whole range of other things. So this is the profound thing, turning me physically and my value into a digital piece of digital code that becomes a contractual obligation, and so forth moving forward. It's profound. And I think one of the other things I want to pick up on, though it's important too, is the concept of the blockchains. The fact that we mustn't just lump all non-fungible tokens into one big crypto asset class. There are multiple classes amongst it, and there are also multiple types of blockchains as well. So, and I think that's important in the conversation, which is also why having the marriage between the legal world and expertise is so important as we move into this space.
One of the benefits that I've got as being almost quasi-MC on, I can change the structure. I note that we're about 20 minutes away from 5, although, as I say, we're very happy to carry on past 5 for some questions. But I'm going to take the executive decision, and I hope that my co-panelists won't hurt me too much on this. We've got 7 questions at least outstanding here. I think we should take the questions if everyone's agreed. I am going to, there's one on, you say the computing power doesn't exist to hack the blockchain. I think I said that. Yet in 1 month in 2019, Ethereum suffered 351% tax. How are NFTs immune to this known inherent weakness in blockchain technology? Me having set it up, I'm going to happily pass it to Lisa.
I knew you would. Again, I think that's misinformation. So I always love these webinars because it's an opportunity to correct information. The 51% is actually a susceptibility rule. It's actually not that they've been hacked. So all blockchains have a 51% susceptibility rule and attempts to circumvent that 51% rule. When you hear that the blockchain has been hacked, that is incorrect. What has been hacked in terms of cryptocurrencies and crypto assets are exchanges. And bear in mind that the exchange is the interface between a blockchain and, I'm going to say, the normal world, the non-blockchain, the off-chain world. So it's the front door key. It's the front door key to a blockchain. And I think this is a critical point, which it brings you, and I know it's one of Dean and my favorite conversations, is the difference between a public or a permissioned a public blockchain and a permissioned or a private blockchain. And that just means simply that a public one means anybody can access. It's not a front door key. It's pervasive. It's everywhere. whereas a permissioned blockchain is like having a blockchain within an architecture of a house, and you need another front door key. And so when we talk about non-fungible tokens, some of our most valuable non-fungible tokens will be produced, sold, retained on a permissioned blockchain where there is another layer of KYC, or know your customer, and anti-money laundering to get in that front door. So again, it's misinformation. This is common across the blockchain world. You know, people say 51% hack. No, it's a 51% susceptibility rule for blockchains. And that's a big difference to being hacked.
Lisa, maybe I may add one thing to that as well, because I'm always baffled that even if you were to see that information on the blockchain, you don't see anything if you don't have the key that gives you the access to the blockchain. All you will see is a bunch of hashes, which make absolutely no sense. And I'm also a firm believer in permission-based blockchain, especially in the art market, where you don't necessarily want to share everything with everyone, insurance values, transportation, etc., whereabouts of the artwork. But you want to give the right people access to that information, especially the information on the due diligence that the people who are involved in the process of, for example, the valuation of the artwork understand who said what about this artwork. I think the permission-based blockchain is definitely going to be so important. And there are quite a few new blockchains being created that are solely permission-based. Yeah.
I think it's important. There's an important. Sorry, Racheal. That I just explain. We who deal with blockchain and the law pretty much every day of the week, and probably more than once a day, we bandy around permissioned and public. And I'll just explain in 2 seconds, and I hope it will be 2 seconds. It's a very good analogy, really. A private blockchain is one that's set up by an individual, a company, an entity. It's like being invited to a private party. You're only allowed entry if you pass the criteria and you've got an invitation, and et cetera, et cetera. The public blockchain and the Ethereum blockchain and Bitcoin, for example, is based on the public blockchain. Those don't have such restrictions. But as Nonna has quite rightly said, you still require certain information to gain access. So I hope that assists with the differences. Can I pick up another couple of questions?
Dean, there was one interesting question, if I may.
Yes,
authenticity. I think it's such a crucial question for everything we're discussing.
Yes.
One of the attendants asked, how do you know that when there is authenticity claimed in an NFT, that's correct? Or if there is on the blockchain statement that this is the authentic piece, whether that's correct? The answer is we don't know. The beauty of the systems that we're endorsing is at least there is traceability, there's trackability of information. That's also why I'm a huge believer in keeping the blockchain clean by having cryptographic signatures in place where you see who said what about an artwork, that you know the person who said it was authentic was actually, or the entity that said it was authentic was, there's a difference whether that was a dealer in Italy who had vested interest for that work to be authentic, or the largest appraisal firm in the world where a group of independent looked at the work, whether it was authentic or not. So all these statements can be part of the NFT, can be part of the blockchain, and all these cryptographic signatures to me are the key to the success of what we're talking about.
And Dean, if I could just follow up on that point, it really draws the two questions together, is that with a private permission blockchain, of course, there are added benefits as well, such as heightened KYC. So as we know in the art world, it's been increasingly subject to AML compliance obligations. Well, in terms of private permission blockchain, you can rely somewhat more certainly on the AML compliance data that you need as an art market participant, particularly in this jurisdiction.
Thanks. I'll just pick up on something which someone I think has said that I would contradict myself over the permission-based blockchain, and I'll read the question. A permission-based blockchain will be a gatekeeper making art less accessible, not more, allowing those on the inside to keep others out. That wasn't the intention, and it wasn't, I don't think, the effect. What actually a permission blockchain would do would be to allow those who pass muster, who abide by the rules, who have the necessary permissions, an entry permissions to gain entry, and those are the kind of people you don't actually want people who are looking to unlawfully deal in art, unlawfully copy works of art. You want people who actually pass the test and pass the criteria. So I hope it wasn't a contradiction, but if it was, I've certainly hoped I've clarified it.
No, and there can be two sets of information. There can be public information. An artwork, the value of an artwork can actually go up when there is public exposure of the artwork with the right entity signing off on that artwork. But there can be on the private blockchain a whole string of events that happens to that artwork that you don't want to be public. As I said, transportation, insurance value, appraisal value, where is the painting currently, under which condition is it stored, and that lives perfectly well on a private blockchain, whereas most likely on an Ethereum base, you can just a consensus base, you can just show all the public information about an artwork.
Thank you. It's a brilliant thing. We're currently in a sea of questions, and I don't know how well our voting procedure is going on at the moment, because I'm almost like King Canute to roll back the tide here, but let's keep going. Let's pick up another one. Does the panel consider blockchain has advantages for establishing provenance for existing historical works of art as opposed to newly created digital works? Aren't all of the uncertainties and difficulties surrounding provenance in the real world still present? Isn't the record only as good as the original data entry? Nonna, can I ask you that first, as someone who deals with art? What do you see as the role of NFTs potentially, and the blockchain in particular here, in relation to previous works of art?
It's audit ready. That's the short answer. It's audit ready. So much information in the trade where I've been in for so many years in different roles is based on trust. And so much information lives in dispersed places. Only comes up when an artwork goes either on loan to a museum or is being sold. Those are two big aggregators of information. There's no need anymore to put that information back in the drawer. Let's keep it out there. It's there. Whether you allow everyone to see it remains to be seen. But at important information like transactions, etc., all that information that is already there should be visible. And there's no guarantee that everything is correct, but especially if you talk about the secondary market, where a lot of the information is based on knowledge from scholarly people or hopefully independent people, you don't know whether it's correct, but at least it's so much better than the current practice, where it lives in the head of one or two people who are selling an artwork. As I said, if information comes out of the drawer, let's keep it there and let's store it in a proper way. And for that, NFTs are absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much.
There's another question. Could the panel address the relation? I'm going to, in fact, ask each of us to have a chat about this one, or certainly might give Nonna a rest for a minute. But could the panel address the relationship of NFTs with IP, and assuming that there is no such relationship necessarily, whether one can be created in the smart contract and or NFT attached to an IP asset? Racheal, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yes, Dean, happy to. So in terms of IP, fundamentally here, when we're talking about NFTs as a new digital asset and smart contracts as a vehicle to set out the terms and conditions of the operation of that asset and how you're to treat it, we're not talking about rewriting the law of copyright here. So fundamentally, we need to know what is the asset, what is being sold. As Lisa said, as we've all said, is it the standalone NFT? Is it an NFT and a physical asset, NFT and a digital asset? So fundamentally, what are the copyrights? You being the seller of that NFT, etc., what rights do you have? And we saw this in the Basco case. Ultimately, you can't transfer title and intellectual property rights if they're not yours to give away. And so as a first principle, the NFT is not creating IP rights, nor is the smart contract. As you and I, Dean, have to do, it's for us to set out in various term texts and other documents to work with smart contract programmers to ensure that those rights are suitably coded within the smart contract itself.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, if I may thoroughly and respectfully agree with everything you've just said, it's absolutely key that the lawyers do what lawyers have been doing and presumably will be doing for many years to come, which is making sure that they're documenting and evidencing what belongs to whom, as it were, and of course then there's the ability to transfer. What we're talking about, and one of the things that I was stressing as being such a plus for NFTs here, is that that's exactly what NFTs gives this, at the moment, unique opportunity to do. It solves so many issues that Nona, I'm sure, must have seen in his daily life. Solves so many issues of provenance and dispute, which sometimes can turn into multi-million-pound legal cases. Some lawyers may say, more of that, please, if we can. But certainly what we're saying here is there's a great ability to make this an opportunity to really start to batten down abilities to ascribe ownership and then allow it to be further transferred. Lisa, anything on IP or
yeah, I think on a couple of things. I think on the IP, 100% agree. I think we're not rewriting. There's a couple of things we're not doing. We're not rewriting intellectual property laws. We're also not rewriting insurance laws. What we are is supporting those. So I saw one question to say that, you know, how can you ensure it if there's a pervasive value? No, the value of an asset that has been is an NFT is directing it to, the value of the asset and what it's been sold for is still a value. The insurance and the way that that's valued and the way that valuations occur, we're not changing that. It's how it's recorded and the provenance of the item and the you know, the growth of that asset and so forth isn't something that we're rewriting. But I think the other thing that's important to have in this conversation is the fact that NFTs are fundamentally changing the business models of the art world as well, not just the actual transaction and the value that we're creating in producing provenance and persistence and pervasiveness and so forth. The business models of the art world are becoming more efficient and more cost efficient, you know, in expediency in time, in the way that records are maintained. You can't physically burn, as in, you know, with a fire, a digital record. There's a you know, persistence in those and pervasiveness in the records and so forth as well. But I think there's elements of that are you know, are critically important. In that, remember that as we are businesses that are changing, so it might be, you know, Sotheby's or Christie's or another business, not only are you changing the way that you manifestly look at assets, you're looking at your business. So the way that your business, this model fits into your business, you're looking at different cybersecurity threat risks and threat intelligence exposures in a business that require assessment when you work into this space. You're going to be exchanging values using cryptocurrencies. It's a different risk threat that's there. I've seen questions come through on KYC and AML. You know, what is one of the most profoundly misunderstood components of the blockchain and cryptocurrency and crypto asset space is the strictness and the requirements that are required for AML and KYC, and that fundamentally they remove the ability for money laundering, because as Nona said, you can see every single transaction on a blockchain. It just won't make any sense to you. It'll look like a whole heap of, you know, gobbledygook in a hash, but it's there to be seen. And if we want to have an audit trail, it's there. And so I think there's two parts to the value of this conversation. It's the conversation about the non-fungible tokens, but it's also the fundamental changes to our business models and the ability to bring in all of these areas of expertise to have conversations about intellectual property, about insurance, and the value that having a non-fungible token adds to that element of the industry.
I thoroughly agree. And then on that topic, there's a couple of questions, and I think they're probably allied, and I'll read them both out, and then we'll endeavour to answer them. Do the panel believe NFTs could assist in reducing art-related financial crimes, or is there a danger that if an NFT can hold its value once the physical work is destroyed, creates another unregulated asset to be manipulated at the hands of criminals? That's question number one. Second, but you have a problem where all right and title and interest in the work has already been assigned, and you also have a problem where the NFT points to an asset where that could in itself involve an infringement of copyright in so doing. I think I'll start by this, but as I say, I'm sure others will contribute. Lisa's last point is something which I just want to overlay here. What we've got is we've got an audit trail. And yes, absolutely, and Non is completely right that it's a series of hashes. But the point about the information on the blockchain is it is retrievable, it is decipherable if you have the proper tools. And the proper tools can be in the hands of those who are proper, and they will remain in the hands of those who are proper. Hence our strong suggestion that permissioned blockchain, with all the rules that surround that, all the entry requirements, is very much the vehicle here. So what we're saying to you is that yes, of course, then there will be, and there may well be attempts at abusing the system, but there's attempts at, and successful attempts every single day of the week, and more than every single day of the week, often every hour of the day, at abusing our current fiat system, our system of forgeries, our system of copying. Nonna, I'm sure in your world, you see and have seen fair share of attempts of people to abuse the system. So I'll ask you, Nonna, first, if I may, your comments on those two questions, please.
I have never been in a panel where the panelists are so eloquent in explaining from a legal point of view, and Lisa, of course, from her huge experience in her world, in what the advantages are. There's basically nothing I can add there. What I can add, and what I often say, how many steps up is this from common practice? Look at common practice. If I may give you two examples. Do I rather buy something where I have the security that all these statements live in the blockchain from someone who can show me the evidence of that, than from someone who tells me, Nana, you can trust me, I have lunch with my mother every day? I mean, why would I trust anyone who has lunch with his mother every day? I mean, it looks nice, maybe they have a great relationship, but it's seriously the kind of motivations you get to trust someone. And if you talk about the money laundering element, what is more trustworthy, a huge suitcase with cash or the systems we're talking about? I think, look at the current practice. I'm not saying everyone is fraudulent in the art market. To the contrary, that's why these systems are actually so good. Let's say 99.5% of the people are actually doing a lot of due diligence. So why be afraid to have these due diligence practices and all the evidence of the due diligence that you have done captured in blockchain and create the kind of systems that we're talking about? And those who are afraid of it, because there is actually a track record, not immediately, I mean, but if there's an audit, you can actually see what happened if you get the right permissions. If you're afraid for the systems, well, then maybe you shouldn't create NFTs or you shouldn't use blockchain technology, but then you shouldn't maybe buy that art if you talk solely about my business, the art market.
Thank you. I think I was going to say, I think you make a really good point, and I think what you said too, Dean, is really critical here. There needs to be a decoupling of the concept of money laundering and blockchain. Let's be really honest and very blunt here. Money laundering did not start with cryptocurrency or blockchain. And in fact, money laundering is more difficult with blockchain and crypto. And we can get some really statistical figures in here to say that 0.3% of all transactions, credit card transactions that are used for cryptocurrencies are fraudulent. And it's 15% that are fraudulent for fiat. Fraud is fraud. Corruption is corruption. Theft is theft. The vehicle for which people may pay for things is not the issue when we're talking about non-fungible tokens and this conversation. So in terms of money laundering, which is often the thing that's thrown at it, that's a really important point. There was another one that is important, and I just flicked up in the chat there, is that, again, when we come back to the ownership, for example, of copyright and so forth, what do I own, what do I don't, and under the NFT digital law, there is no such thing as NFT digital law. NFTs are unique in their singularity. If you think about, the best way to think about it is think about every single human is an NFT, a non-fungible token. You are not exchangeable for another in any identity capacity. And so the rights that go with a non-fungible token are contractual, and they are determined in a legal capacity. And I think that's important. I
think it's very important as well, Lisa, that and others, is that this is about control of an artist to give rights over their work as well as the rights of someone who is buying that work. Now, let's not forget, and there's lots of questions about regulation, and we'll probably end on one of those in a moment, but let's not forget, and to endorse Lisa's point, this is a contractual arrangement. And what an artist wants to do, and some may say fair enough, I would say fair enough, if that artist has produced a piece of work, are they not entitled to have rights over that piece of work? Are they not entitled to have not to have to suffer the problems of someone copying that work and selling it off as their own? And this is something that what we're saying here is the combination of the unique capacity of an NFT plus, and I would say this, wouldn't I, but candidly, it is absolute fact, proper lawyers and proper experts making sure that the rights are transferred and they are dealt with in the first instance. That is, this makes this a much more efficient and much less crime-friendly way of dealing with this. It's really important. Yes, there might be regulation, and I'll come on in a moment for the panel's final thoughts on regulation. It usually ends up in regulation. We've just finished a cryptocurrency regulation webinar. I've got another one coming up in a couple of weeks' time. Yes, it comes to regulation, but here it's vital that we remember that this is a contractual relationship. This is a contractual principle, and it's what is prepared to be given, what is prepared to receive. So can I just then, we're about 6 or 7 minutes over, which we're happy to be. Can we finish up on this last question? There's an amalgam of questions about regulation. What's the panel's view about regulation? Can I start with you, Lisa, please?
No, I don't agree with a business model being regulated, and an asset, if it's an asset, I don't believe that it should be regulated. I do believe that there should be rules around asset classes and the creation of cryptocurrencies, and to a certain degree, because the very fundamental principles of blockchain are that they are non-regulated. But there are elements of it that obviously do create, challenges. So having regulations around what an asset class is, whether it falls in under FCA regulations and those sort of things, yes. But I wouldn't like to see, and I think it is fundamentally wrong, that any government or regulator comes in and starts to tell us what we can sell and what we can buy, because that's a very different conversation. What really is occurring in this regulatory conversation is people are trying to control something they don't understand. They think if they don't understand it, the only way that I can manage it is by controlling it. And that's erroneous. The way that we can actually understand what we, and get knowledge is education. And so, I'm just seeing a question that's just in the chat here, and this is important to the regulatory effect, is that bear in mind, if you're purchasing a non-fungible token that is a digital art, the non-fungible token is not the piece of digital art. It is separate. So you have a piece of digital art and you have a non-fungible token. Two separate conversations. So the key to this is not regulation, it's education.
Thank you. Racheal, regulation, your view on it?
Well, I think we both share the same view, don't we, Dean, that the regulators are far behind the curve here. From a UK regulatory perspective, the entitlement to certain rights, such as the right of ownership, the right to income or a share in future profits, that this may mean that a particular NFT is a security, according to the UK's Financial Conduct Authority. So in time, we may find that NFTs will be the subject of much regulation, and they will need that oversight from the FCA. And hence, that's why you'll need to come to us to ensure that you're compliant with your regulatory obligations, particularly in terms of financial institutions.
Thank you. Nora, I'm going to give the last word on regulation to you before I then come back with a few closing remarks.
Well, regulation and compliance in the world where I'm coming from was usually not met with a lot of enthusiasm. interestingly enough, because we all know, and also in the world where I'm from, that an artwork where actually a big compliance team at Sotheby's of Christie's have done all the due diligence is much more valuable than any other artwork. So everybody also understands how important it is. I'm sure the whole NFT market will be somewhat regulated. And in a way, that's a good thing, especially if you talk to the team here. What I know, since my company is asked a lot for advice also by auction houses, by the way, to help them with minting NFTs and the whole process, is what I find stunning is that most people think about a lot of expenses for creating NFTs, and one of the expenses they hardly ever mention is the legal expenses. And I believe if you start with a smart contract done by technical people, where, for example, resale rights are being triggered, distribution of funds are being triggered, collection of fees are being triggered, then I'd rather have a legal agreement underneath the smart contract that clearly stipulates why all these kind of payments will be made and why the collection of fees will be made in the future, rather than just creating a smart contract where things are being triggered, where there is most likely not a legal framework underneath. So, yeah.
Thank you, Nona. Well, it's just after 5:10 in the UK. Can I bring this to a close with the greatest of thanks, obviously to my colleague Racheal Muldoon, who is, as I say, not only an expert in the art world, but also a really terrific lawyer. Delighted, and thank you so much to Lisa and to Nona for bringing such a breath of fresh air away from the rarefied atmosphere of the law to bring it to life for us. And I certainly believe and hope that you agree that their contribution has really brought this subject to life. It's a fascinating subject. We at 36 Commercial really are in the vanguard of this. We're loving the kind of work that we're doing. We're delighted to interact with anyone who wishes to interact with us on this topic. I'm pleased to say that one of the benefits of webinars being recorded is that obviously they can be recreated and you can listen, or others can listen and tell your friends to listen to us. I think we've even made the airways of Spotify. So there we are, we're up there with the greats. Can I thank you all for your time this afternoon, and we really appreciate your contributions and your questions. And so there will be other 36 seminars. The next one I think is on the 20th of May. I think you might be hearing me again on that. Many thanks to all. Good afternoon to you.